that it is not an easy trip from a guy who can produce because he's surrounded by other producers and a guy who is looked at to be the primary producer. Being a first option, going from one of the important guys, but one of the guys, to being the first option it's a trip. It's a far trip. And navigating that is not and for it's and it isn't for some people. Like for some players, it's like it's not for me. That like not it doesn't fit everybody. And for Ortega, he has to find his way there. And part of the issue in him finding his way there is he's not been able to get his shot to drop.
Welcome to the CL Brown Show. I am your host, CL Brown, columnist with the Louisville Courier-Journal. On this episode of the show, I welcome columnist from the Sporting News, Mike DeCourcy, to break down all of college basketball happening so far in the season. My sound off this episode comes from the gridiron, where many of you have probably seen the footage of the Texas State Trooper from the game Texas A&M against South Carolina on Saturday. For those of you who are not aware of it, I will give you the brief rundown. So, Nick Harper, right receiver for South Carolina, scores on an 80-yard touchdown. South Carolina is about to be up 27-3 in the first half of that game, second quarter. Towards the end of his touchdown run, catch and run, looks like he might have tweaked his hamstring. So he's kind of running with the limp, grabbing the back of one of his legs. And for any of you who've had a hamstring pull, you know that if you're running, you don't just abruptly stop on it because that could actually aggravate it some more. So he kind of let himself tail off. He runs into the tunnel. A couple of his teammates join him in that tunnel. One of them was Oscar Hadaway. As they are proceeding back down the tunnel towards the field, there is a Texas Department of Safety trooper, Texas DPS, who literally comes in between, purposely walks in between both Harbor and Hadaway and gives them the business. He gives them a little shove. He extends his arms to where even though they're trying to part a little bit to give him some room to get through, he intentionally bumps both of them, turns around like they were the problem, and mouths something like basically like get back to the field or something as if he needs to control this scenario. So it takes me back to the adage that I've heard from a lot of coaches over the years. If you can't do the small things right in practice, they can't trust you to do the big things. This state trooper needs to never work another game again at Kyle Field in College Station for Texas A&M. That's for starters. Secondly, though, this was a college football game. These were players in the game. This wasn't some incident in the stand. This wasn't, people being in the wrong place on the sideline, trying to be on the field without the proper credential. This wasn't any of that stuff. He has zero to do with players and the actual game being played. Yet he felt the need to insert himself in a situation, probably thinking that they were celebrating when Harbor ran into the tunnel, probably thinking they were trying to show up Texas A&M, and at that time they were winning the game big, and he took offense to it. So if you can't humble yourself in a situation like that, to know that that's not even your job. That's not your responsibility to corral players. If anything, a referee could have taken issue and gone up to the tunnel to make sure it wasn't some kind of unsportsmanlike conduct, showboating kind of thing going on. That would have been the referee's job. That's not the job of the Texas State Trooper or the Texas Department of Public Safety Trooper. So I'm not saying he should get fired. But if he feels the need to control kids playing a game, I'm even trying not to throw the racial element in here, but I'm sure there's a racial element in there because the two of the South Carolina players were black. The state trooper was white. I do feel like there was some bit of control that he wanted to assert over these young black players. But I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to stay on a base level. He should not be able to work another game for football again. And if he wants to patrol the streets, if he wants to be out in a car patrolling the highways in Texas, he needs to go to some kind of class to be retrained because clearly he doesn't have the temperament. And this is why I feel like we have so many incidents and run-ins with the police because of people that aren't properly trained. They don't have the proper temperament to serve, and they get in a situation where they feel like they have to assert their authority when it's not warranted. So that's my sound off for the day. I won't be going to Texas A&M anytime soon, certainly not to play football, but I just felt like I had to say something on it. So now let's jump into this interview with Mike DeCourcy. Now I'd like to welcome back to the show Mr. Michael DeCourcy, fellow Pittsburgh Steelers fan, but in his real life, his real job, he's a superb columnist for the Sporting News. Mike, thank you for joining me.
Happy to do it, CL. It's always a pleasure.
Indeed. Well, I want to start with just the excitement I feel like the freshman class of 2025 has brought and injected into the start of this college basketball season. Did you see this coming? I mean, I know we had some talented guys, but I don't know if we thought it was going to have this effect.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, yes, but not to this extent. I watched the FIBA U19 World Cup that happened this past summer, and there were Kentucky and Louisville players involved in that. And that's an age group. The U.S. still wins the majority of time, but it's one that every now and then they have a tough time in because in a lot of cases, first of all, the very best 19-year-olds are entering the draft, either usually out of their freshman years in high school. So those guys might be eligible, but they're not participating. Whereas Victor Wembanyama, for instance, played a few years back for France. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it is sometimes you get college players that are either in college now or players transitioning to college that will go and their coaches will kind of whisper, "We don't really want you going to France or going to uh, Abu Dhabi or whatever it might be. We'd really rather have you on campus." And so then they don't go to the trials. But in this case, we had AJ Demancia go, we had Mikel Brown go, we had Jasper Johnson go. It was a really strong group of incoming freshmen as well as some holdovers like Marez Johnson of Michigan, Daniel Jacobson of Purdue, some others. And they played extraordinarily well. They had a tough game against Canada in which Jasper was one of the heroes. I thought Michael was the best player in the tournament. AJ, the best pro prospect, the biggest name. He wound up getting the MVP trophy. I still think that Michael was the reason that the U.S. was as great as they were there. And because they were so dominant in so many of their games, and there were very good freshmen on some of the other teams. Heinz Steinbach from Germany
Oh yeah.
was on, who's now on Washington's roster, and one of those great freshmen we're talking about. It was part of that field, and there were a couple that are at UConn now. One from Australia, Furphy, and also one from Germany. And so there were really good players all throughout this tournament. But even at that, I've been surprised by how impactful this group has been. And I used Kingston Flemings from Houston as the best example of that. Top 20, I think, in his class. I thought, you look at that on paper and you think, okay, well, they could use some more depth in their backcourt, maybe. But they had two guys coming back who started in the national championship game on the perimeter,
Yeah.
and their best guard on Sunday night against Auburn, a terrific team, was Kingston Flemings.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like in a lot of respects that we all should have seen this coming because last year was the final season of COVID seniors. So in some respects, I'm not gonna say it got younger because NIL and everything's still keeping kids in college a lot longer than 10, 15 years ago. But I do think that it kind of maybe opened the door a little bit more for talented guys, talented freshmen to come in and make impact. But you mentioned Mikel Brown. Let's jump into Louisville for a second with their win over Kentucky in the big rivalry game and him playing not just a big part in that individual single game, but I kind of look bigger picture of him operating like that under the spotlight of what has been a game that has, you know, since John Calipari when he came to Kentucky, the last 16 years basically has been dominated by Kentucky, and he kind of snatched back a little bit of pride for U of L in the way that he played. What do you feel like? I imagine the sky's the limit with his talent, but what do you feel like realistically we should expect from him the rest of this season?
Well, in talking about how surprised we are by the freshmen, I mean, I had two freshmen on my All-America first team preseason, AJ, who I mentioned before, and Darren Peterson at Kansas. And then I had, I believe, two on my second team as well, Cameron Boozer down at Duke, and I had Mikel because I watched that U20s U19s, excuse me, and I knew what I saw. And that was a guy who could do what he did last Tuesday. And I know he didn't have the best exhibition game against Kansas in the exhibition opener. That's okay because we don't really count that. I mean, you might look at that and say, is he really that good? And then he comes out against Kentucky and says, dang right, I'm really that good. I'm really that good. And so what I think it's reasonable to expect from him is to play at an all-American contender level. I mean, if he doesn't make it, say, that doesn't mean he's had a bad year, but I think he has the ability to be one of the 10, 15 best players in college basketball. And I think if he is one of the 10 best players, 10 or 15 best players in college basketball, I think Louisville's horizons are immense. If he's not, then maybe Louisville can't quite get there. But I think he's that kind of player. I think he's a terrific passer. I say that he's not there. There's that group of guys, Magic, Penny Hardaway, Jason Kidd, who just seems like they see like 360 degrees. There are those guys. And then there are the guys like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and Tyrese Halliburton who see a pass or two ahead and are elite at setting up plays. And I think he can be in that group when he gets to the league. And obviously now in the college level, I mean, he's not going to have quite the level of finishing teammates that he'll have next season, but he has a really good group around him. I think he has the ability to average in the range of 7 assists. And given that he's probably also their best scoring option, I think that to be in the neighborhood of 18 to 20 points and 6 to 7 assists a game is not out of his reach.
What do you think? What did you like about the rest of Louisville's team? And do you see, are there any kind of, red flags that well, not even a red flag, but just something that would give you pause from saying this could eventually be a Final Four team?
Well, I think one of the things that I talked about recently is Ryan Conwell, who has been to this point of this season just fantastic. And he's been really productive and he's been really consistent. And a year ago, when he was at Xavier, and I saw him a ton because I did some work on a show called Inside the Big East for Fox Sports. And he finished really strong, but he had a lot of up and down during the course of the Big East season. And I think that impacted the way Xavier's season developed. That him being here then and not here other times made a big difference to why it was such a struggle for them to ultimately get in. They did get in even with only having one quad one victory. But I thought that if they could have gotten that reliability out of him, they maybe would have had a smoother path into the field rather than have to play in Dayton and all of that. But he's been that player very consistently. You count the exhibition games if you want. You don't have to, but if you do, you're looking at a half dozen games now where he's been very productive on a regular basis and very consistent from the perimeter. And so I really like that. Having a 1-2 punch in the backcourt like he and Mikel is really promising.
Yeah,
And then you look at the front court, and I don't think that you are likely to get a ton of production from your interior game. It's not going to be where you go for offense. But if those guys battle on the boards and they get extra possessions for the two guards I mentioned, I think that can be really important. And then obviously they have to defend at a high level. They have to protect the rim. Uh, Frew would be a player that I would think would have to protect the rim at a high level. I think if they need to do a better job at that as a group. It can't just be one guy that's protecting the rim. But I do think that they have great possibilities because you have that guard combination that ranks with the very best in college basketball.
yeah,
It's too early to say. I mean, if you're going to say right now who's got the best backcourt in college basketball, it's either going to be Houston because they had two guys starting the championship game and the freshman Kingston Flemings I mentioned, or you've got Purdue, which has two 4-year starters in the backcourt. So it's going to be them. But there's a lot of basketball to establish by the end of the year whose guards you can really trust.
yeah, yeah. Well, I want to transition to the other side of the rivalry, the losing side from last week, Kentucky. Obviously, I feel like we haven't even seen who they're really going to be because
Yeah.
of the injuries that they've had. Jalen Lowe is out for the was out for the Michigan State game. Trent Noah, his status is kind of, give and take. And so, and then I haven't even mentioned Jaden Quaton, who I wrote a column, Mike, that I don't think he should play at all this year. Given the timing of his knee injury towards the end of last season, it just seems like even with all the technology and how it's no longer, a career ender to have that kind of ACL tear, I just feel like it might be better for him to sit out. But he's working that rehab path. He's trying to get back too. So, what do you make of Kentucky at this point? Just kind of given all of those factors.
Well, the fact that Lowe played not at all in exhibitions and then not in the early part of the pre-conference games, and then went out and tried to give it a go against Louisville and took a step back. I thought all along that he was perfectly positioned to bring a sense of cohesion to this offense. I live in Pittsburgh. I've lived in Pittsburgh for the last year and a half, so I was here. I saw him 2, 3 times last year in person. Because I'm a Pittsburgher, I've tended, you don't necessarily root for teams, but you look out for teams that are in your area or whatever. And so I watched the Panthers when he was a freshman as well. Saw his big Duke game, breakout game, and so I know his game fairly well, and I thought he needed to play with slightly better teammates, either at Pitt or now he's going to be at Kentucky, and I thought that would really help him, and I thought that he would bring that definition to the offense. I think Denzel Aberdeen is a really good guard. Uh, Last year at Florida, he played probably on average about 7 minutes a game in the biggest games at point guard. And now, if Jalen is unavailable for any protracted period of time, I don't think they've really decided what direction they're going to go. But if he's unavailable, then Denzel becomes your primary point guard, and that changes everything. It changes for him.
Yeah,
It's a great opportunity for Denzel because he goes from what I would call the best third guard in America, which he was last year, and he would have been again probably this year, to a guy who has a chance to run a high level team that's a NCAA tournament team and maybe a contender to make a run at a Final Four. And so it really changes his horizon in terms of his current situation as well as his future. But I do think it diminishes. It's likely to diminish Kentucky at the offensive end at least a smidge.
Yeah.
I know Denzel had a great game against Louisville from the standpoint of getting his own bucket and all that. Uh, but what it would do, though, is would remove some of the doubt about what Kentucky will be defensively in the backcourt. 'Cause that's the one weakness of Jalen's game, or what has been a weakness of Jalen's game, and that he needed to step up in this particular season. It's hard to take a big step up defensively when you're dealing with the kind of injury he has.
Yeah.
Because being a assertive defender is a physical job. And it's hard to do that when you're hampered by a shoulder injury that you're trying to get to the offensive end where you can still probably do most or a lot of what you can do uh, uh, successfully. But at the defensive end, how do you step forward as a defender when that involves being handsy and being in traffic and being able to bump a guy every now and then and all that? So it really makes it hard. Denzel doesn't have that concern. He's a big, physical, strong, quick, dynamic guard. So your on-ball defense. I mean, we saw it last week, right? Against
Yeah.
Louisville. He was on the ball a lot of the time anyway. So your on-ball defense becomes full-time as good as anybody's, give or take, in college basketball. And then you have to build an offense around that. And that's the challenge. Colin Chandler becomes much more important as a result of that. I think you have to find a way to create a bigger role for Jasper Johnson if if you don't have Jalen available. And you have to make sure that that Denzel is now able to be the creator in whatever way he has in his bag to be at least approximate the creation ability that Jalen brings naturally.
Yeah. So, one player who coming into this year, we all felt like was going to be a key for UK, Otega Owe. He was preseason SEC Player of the Year, voted preseason Player of the Year. So far, I'm kind of like, where did Otega go? Like, I feel like he's not quite the same. And I would have voted him preseason player of the year too, or on first team for sure, all SEC and all of those accolades, because I do think he has that in him. But I was disappointed with his performance in the Louisville game. I felt like he just kind of disappeared and was never really a factor, never really asserted himself. And I don't know, just from outside looking in, it just feels like he wasn't himself. I mean, am I off on that, Mike? Have you
No,
kind of
but
noticed that?
I think that what I talked about in the preseason was that it is not an easy trip from a guy who can produce because he's surrounded by other producers and a guy who is looked at to be the primary producer. Being a first option, going from one of the important guys, but one of the guys, to being the first option it's a trip. It's a far trip. And navigating that is not and for it's and it isn't for some people. Like for some players, it's like it's not for me. That like not it doesn't fit everybody. And for Ortega, he has to find his way there. And part of the issue in him finding his way there is he's not been able to get his shot to drop. And it at the college level, especially for a wing player, it becomes really hard to be that guy if you're not making shots, at least at a decent clip, like a 33 to 34% clip. If you can hit that, which I think Ortega did his last season. If you can hit that number, then all the rest of the things that you can do that make you dangerous are still empowered. But if nobody has to guard you seriously for that 3-point shot, then it becomes really hard to be that guy to do to get by people and make things happen in the lane. And so he's got to get that shot to drop if he's going to be the player who was preseason first team Sporting News All-American, as well as SEC Player of the Year. The shot's got to go. And like I said, doesn't have to be like he doesn't have to turn into Steve Alford or whatever. Uh, but he has to get up to that 34-35% range where you're a threat.
Yeah,
And they have to be honest about guarding you and not just sag off and gum up not only your offense, but everybody else as well.
indeed, indeed. Well, I'll leave it on this question. I've asked kind of the same thing of Louisville. What do you really like when all the pieces come together for Kentucky? What do you really like about this roster composition, and what gives you pause on, saying that they can achieve at a high level?
Well, what I like still, even without Jaden, uh, you still have great depth, and even if you don't have available Jalen, you still have significant depth. You have a lot of different pieces you can play. Not very many teams in the country have two centers, like Malachi Moreno and Brandon Garrison, both able to finish plays, both shot blockers, both rebounders. Moreno has been like we talked about those freshmen.
Go
Like
ahead.
he's maybe not at that level up there where you're talking lottery pick and everything, but he's been a really important player to date, and I think he continued to grow in influence. So I like the depth, and I like the ability to improve defensively. That I still anticipate this being a team. I think I know they were in the 50s. I know off the top of my head that like Purdue and they were both in the low 50s. And I can never keep straight which was which in terms of Ken Palm defensive efficiency. But 50s isn't good enough. It's not what Kentucky's used to. It's not what wins big games in the NCAA tournament most of the time. So I think this team can still be significant defensively, even though they had a rough go of it at Louisville. I think they'll improve at that end. And what gives me pause is the obvious. Point guard we talked about before, and then 3-point shooting. It can be an obstacle for a lot of teams. Like Michigan State is not a great 3-point shooting team, but they're going to play around that. They know they have to play around it. They'll try to get the guys who can shoot some shots, but they know that they have to make it hard for you to shoot from three. That they got to get every rebound, and they've got to be efficient with their offensive opportunities, even if it means scoring two at a time. That's not the way this Kentucky team was constructed. It's not the way Mark wants to play. It's what you saw last week that they were going to keep going and keep chucking. And when I say chucking, I don't mean it in the bad sense.
Yep.
But they're going to keep taking threes. Well, if you're going to do that, I mean, you got to make sure that you can hit him at a good clip. And I think one of the things they have to do is, in addition to getting Ortega going from there, is try to emphasize the guys who are really good shooters, Colin and Jasper in particular. Get them as many shots as possible. It's not just about getting the first 3-point shot necessarily, as it is getting a high quality 3-point shot. I think they were a little quick with going toward the first opportunity in the Louisville game, and it cost them. But they'll learn over time.
Indeed, indeed. Well, words of wisdom being spoken here. I appreciate you, Mike, as always. I definitely owe you for this one. Thank you for jumping in and being a guest, and definitely want to get you back on probably towards the NCAA tournament time.
Sounds good, CL. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. And now it's time for pickup lines, where I'm trying to pick college football winners based on the point spread. Let's jump right into Louisville is a 3-point underdog traveling to SMU. A lot of people are down on the Cards, rightfully so, after dropping back-to-back games. I do not see Jeff Brom dropping three straight, even with the formidable SMU team. I think the main thing is the Cards defense has been pretty consistent all year. In this game, they lost to SMU last season at home, was kind of the game that made everything turn around for them defensively. They got Ron English to come from calling games from the press box, from the coach's box up in the sky, down on the sideline. They streamline their communication. I think we're going to see a big difference from last year to this season on Saturday in this game. So I'm going to take those 3 points and take the Cards, probably to win outright, but definitely to cover the spread. UK is a 9.5 point underdog on the road at Vanderbilt. And this is a game, this is one of those opponents where I kind of feel like every year it doesn't matter who's kind of in a good flow when that game comes around, because obviously Vanderbilt has had a great season and they're 9.5 point favorites for a reason. But we've watched UK go from basically turned this entire season around with this current three-game winning streak they're on, winning at Auburn, holding that offense to 3 points, and that had been a steady, even though they didn't get a lot of breaks this season. Auburn had been in every game, and to basically be the game that got Hugh Freeze fired speaks a lot to how competitive this UK team has been, even with their lows and their valleys this season. So I think they're coming in on a high. Cutter Boley has only gotten better as the season has gone on at quarterback, and that offense is better than it was, much better than it was early in the season. So I'm gonna say defense travels for UK, and I'm gonna take the Wildcats and the points. So I'm starting off with two road dogs. I don't know how that's gonna work out for me, but we'll see. Moving on to the ACC, a big game. Pitt at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is a 2.5 point favorite. They struggled at Boston College last week on the road, and I think part of the reason was Georgia Tech was already looking ahead to this Pitt game. I'm going with the Yellow Jackets. It seems like Brent Key always has them ready in the big marquee games, and this could basically cement their spot in the ACC championship game. Not basically, it will cement their spot in the ACC championship game if they win. And I think they could cement themselves a spot in the college football playoff if they win out, beating Pitt and then beating Georgia next week. It's a tall task to ask, but that's what I think it'd take to get it done to where they would be a shoe-in for an at-large bid. So taking the Yellow Jackets, giving the points, moving on to BYU, a 2.5 point favorite at Cincinnati, right up the road here. BYU has kind of been a tough team to figure out, but I think when it comes down to it, they are going to get it done. So I'm gonna take BYU and give the points in that. I feel like Cincinnati has kind of regressed a little bit in the past couple of weeks when their competition level has turned up. I think they've taken a little bit step back. So I'm gonna go with the Cougars and give the points. Another road team I'm taking. And lastly, we got USC, a 9.5 point underdog at Oregon, a big game in the Big Ten will have big college football playoff implications in terms of the losing team probably will not be in a position to get an at-large bid. The winning team will still be very much in the mix and may even cement their place possibly. Oregon, I was big on Oregon earlier in the season, kind of cooled off on the Ducks. And I'm taking so many road dogs. I feel like because I've taken other road dogs, I shouldn't take this one. But I think I'm taking USC. I still think Oregon is going to win the game, but I do think 9.5 is a bit too much given the way that USC has played lately. They proved to be a physically tough team in winning last week, and yeah, I'm going to go with the Trojans. We'll see how that works out for me. So that will do it for another edition of the CL Brown Show. Thank you for tuning in. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, please click on those follow buttons to subscribe to the show. If you're just listening through one of the many podcast channels, also please click on those buttons to subscribe. Please leave a 5-star review, however you're digesting this, whether it's video or audio, because we need more love in this world. And you can always catch my columns at courier-journal.com. I thank you for all your support throughout this season as we're about to wind down football and be totally into basketball.